Welcome everybody to 52 Living Ideas. We are going through Dao De Jing. We are on number 33 and 34. Today we are going to try something different. Jason is not here and Amon is going to read out the verses, the translations that Jason has done. And what we are going to do is that we are going to do two at once. We're going to start with Amon reading the number 33 and number 34. And then we will go into number 33 and we'll go into number 34. After that, maybe we'll do them in parallel. Okay, let's see how it goes. That way, if Amon needs to leave early, he can leave early, and we would have gotten the great translations of the great Jason. So that's the plan for today. Let's get started. So Amon, could you do the honors and talk to us about, read the translation of Jason of number 3.
I will share my screen and show you what has been done. Let me see. Share. I think I can do that. Never actually shared a screen before, so it's asking for permissions.
Let me see. You go ahead and click on the green button in the middle of your screen at the bottom.
It's telling me that it needs permissions because I haven't. It'll make me quit. Okay. So I haven't shared a screen before in a Zoom, and it's telling me in order to update the permissions. So what I will do instead is I will copy and paste them into the chat so that everyone has the ability to see them.
Sure.
At least. Oh, come on. Haha.
Do others of us have access to the Google Doc? I mean, somebody else could share it from.
Is there a trick to copy and paste here?
You can email it to me. I can share it if you want. You can. Are you having trouble cutting and pasting it?
Yes, it's.
There is a limit on how much text you can cut and paste. Try smaller pieces.
Fair enough. So I will read these out as I go.
Sure.
Chapter 33. Those who know people are wise. Those who know themselves are enlightened. Those who can excel over others are strong. Those who can excel over themselves are powerful. Those who are content are wealthy. Those who are perseverant are aspirational. Those who do not lose their original minds are enduring. Those who died by body, but are not forgotten by mind, are immortal. Let's see if this works. There we go. Ta-da! I just needed to do it into 2 couplets. And chapter 34. Thankfully, these are short. The Tao is like water, floating all over the place. All things depend on it and are never dismissed. It accomplishes, but never possesses. It nurtures all things, but it never dominates. In this regard, it seems small. All things submit themselves to it, but it never dominates. In this regard, it seems great. Because the Tao never claims its own greatness, it always succeeds at being great. And there is that one. And I'll just say a couple of words about 33 in the translation, because that's the one that I was able to collaborate more with him. There is a word that pops up multiple times in each of those verses, and it's the word lao. This word, which you can go back and reference in the poem, is really difficult to translate. So when you read it and it says those who know people or those who can excel over others, or excuse me, this is zhi, not lao. Zhi in this context makes something into a qualitative of someone who does something. It's like adding er to the end of an English word. So run becomes runner, swim becomes swimmer. And so you see where it's repeated again and again and again in the text, saying that those who are the knowers of people are wise. Those who are the exceller over others are strong. It makes for a very challenging translation. This was not actually the recommendation I gave him. I think Jason gave a very good translation, one that lends itself to being better understood. Though I did try and give him something a little more consistent, because it's a really difficult term to easily translate into English. The only thing I have to say about the chapter 34, the expression, the Tao flows like water all over, those two characters right at the very end of that first sentence are the words left and right. And so left, right, as I said before, is often, zoyo is often used to express the term almost, but it can also mean all over the place. Yeah, so this one I think was a little bit smoother. Actually, there were some of the things that I had suggested that he added in here. But I think it reads very smoothly, and I think he brings the logic of these chapters out, which is really what he's after, is to communicate what is the sentiment of the chapter. So yes, that's 33 and 34 by Jason.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Amon. And thank you, Jason. So let's start with 33. So we're going to do it, first 33 and then 34. I just wanted to make sure that we had the number 34 translation of Jason read. So let's start with number 33. Who would like to read the translations that they like? Go ahead and type exclamation mark to read the translations you like. It's going to be Joe, Evanique, and David first. Joe.
So this is Ron Hogan's, and this is the first time I'm actually reading his. So knowing things makes you smart, but knowing yourself makes you wise. To rule others, you must be powerful, but to rule yourself, you must be strong. If you have only what you need, you have true wealth. If you never give up, you will find a way. If you stay true to yourself, you will never be lost. If you stay alive your whole life, you've really lived.
Wow. Thank you, Joe. I really like the translation. Next up is Evanique, David, Judith, and Krishna. Evanique.
Okay, so mine is from God as Nature Sees God. One who knows others is intelligent. One who knows himself is truly wise. One who overcomes others has force. One who overcomes the self has true strength. One who knows he has enough is truly wealthy. One who has discipline is sincere. One who remembers his source will endure. He embraces death and so does not perish, but lives forever.
Wonderful. Thank you. Joe, the translation was very good. Can you read it one more time, please?
Yeah, sure, no problem at all. Knowing things makes you smart, but knowing yourself makes you wise. To rule others, you must be powerful, but to rule yourself, you must be strong. If you have only what you need, you have true wealth. If you never give up, you will find a way. If you stay true to yourself, you will never be lost. If you stay alive your whole life, you've really lived.
Wow. Excellent. Thank you, Joe. Next up is David, followed by Judith. David.
Yes, this is the Harold Old translation. To know others is to be clever. To know oneself is to be enlightened. He who conquers others has strength, but he who conquers himself has strength and courage indeed. To know when one has enough is to be rich. He who pursues a course with energy may attain his goal, but to remain in one's proper place is to endure. And he who dies yet does not cease to be achieves the blessing of true longevity.
Thank you. Thank you, David. Next up is Judith, followed by Krishna. Judith.
This is the Stephen Mitchell translation. Knowing others is intelligence. Knowing yourself is true wisdom. Mastering others is strength. Mastering yourself is true power. If you realize that you have enough, you are truly rich. If you stay in the center and embrace death with your whole heart, you will endure forever.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. Next up is Krishna. Krishna, go ahead.
Okay, this is the Red Vine translation. Those who know others are perceptive. Those who know themselves are wise. Those who conquer others are forceful. Those who conquer themselves are strong. Those who know contentment are wealthy. Those who strive hard are resolved. Those who don't lose their place endure. Those who aren't affected by death live long. And he comments at the end, although Jiang Huang, striving hard, of line 6 seems at odds with Lao Tzu's dictum of Wu Wei, doing nothing effortlessness. Commentators are agreed that there refers to inner cultivation and not to the pursuit of worldly goals. This verse is absent from quotient test.
Thank you. Thank you. Amon, could you read the number 33 from Jason again?
Yes. Those who know people are wise. Those who know themselves are enlightened. Those who can excel over others are strong. Those who can excel over themselves are powerful. Those who are content are wealthy. Those who are perseverant are aspirational. Those who don't lose their original mind are enduring. Those who die but are not to be forgotten are immortal.
Wonderful. Thank you. All right. If anybody else wants to read, they're welcome to do that. Otherwise, we're going to go to comments. So go ahead and let's talk about what we get from this poem. And I looked at all the distinctions that he's drawing and looked at the second part of all the distinctions. I'm going to read one my favorite translation by Ursula Le Guin. She calls it kinds of power. Knowing other people is intelligence. Knowing yourself is wisdom. Overcoming others takes strength. Overcoming yourself takes greatness. Contentment is wealth. Boldly pushing forward takes resolution. Staying put keeps you in position. To live till you die is to live long enough. So let's go ahead and talk about what we get from this chapter. It's going to be Joe, followed by Judith. Joe.
I was actually, my explanation point was to read the Ursula Le Guin translation, but that's okay. I mean, I have comments that I can make about the poem itself.
Sure.
The idea of knowing yourself is to be self-aware, And I have to say this, I know that this is maybe a little bit of tunnel vision, but I also believe that this really speaks to the idea of the dichotomy of control in Stoicism. What you're in control of and what you're not in control of. And that is actually a source of power per se. You're not in control of other people. You're in control of yourself. So that there's an element of self-mastery that comes into this. The other is you're not seeking the approval of other people as well. That's really comes out with if you're in charge of yourself, you're essentially not necessarily looking to external things. Something I also saw, and I guess we'll get to this in 34. And there's a certain tranquility that exists with all of this, because if you have only what you need, you have true wealth. There's a tranquility with that. And that's the same thing as knowing yourself. Having a tranquil mind is you know yourself, and you know your relationship to the external world, and you know what you're in control of, and you know what you're not in control of. So I think that there is a real peacefulness that comes, speaks to me with this particular poem. And I like this. I like the Ursula Le Guin version a lot as well.
Wonderful, thank you. My favorite line from that Ursula Le Guin's translation is the last one. To live till you die is to live long enough.
It was excellent, yeah.
Thank you. Next up is going to be Judith, Maritza, and Charlie. Judith.
So the first part I thought was pretty self-evident, what they were saying in the first section. What I was most interested in, especially when I heard the different translations, was the reference to death. So for my Stephen Mitchell, it says, if you stay in the center and embrace death with your whole heart, you will endure forever. And the way I think about it, or think about death, is that if you don't embrace that part of life, that reality of life, that there is death, then or if you avoid it somehow, the thought of it, then you miss on opportunities to really make the most of life and live in the moment and be able to recognize what's important. When people encounter death through, loss of loved ones or their own, perhaps, near death experience, I think they develop a real strong appreciation of that, and they actually live quite differently than most people in the world. So that's the way I thought about it because of my translation, I think. And I felt Jason's was quite different. I can't remember offhand, it just seemed like the translations brought out a different kind of thought about that. So I'm curious to hear what others think about that, or what they got from that part of the verse.
Judith, that's an excellent suggestion. So we're going to take a slight detour. Let's just look at the last couplets. And if everybody could just read out, we'll go to Maritza and Charlie for general comments, and to everybody else for general comments later. But let's just look at how it ends in various translations. So I'm going to read Ursula Le Guin's translation, and go ahead and type exclamation mark if you could read your translation, just the last two lines. This translation: to live till you die is to live long enough. Margarita.
I was thinking about commenting actually, but okay.
We will go ahead and yeah, let's just do the 2 lines. You can
Okay.
read it in Bahasa and translate it for us.
Oh, okay.
That's 2
So
lines.
in bahasa, siapa yang setelah mati tapi tidak musnah, ialah yang berusia panjang. Whoever after he died but do not perish, he has the long life, longevity, something like that.
Wonderful, thank you. Next up is going to be Joe, Evanique, David, and Maritza. Joe.
So my last 2 lines are, if you stay alive your whole life, you've really lived. And can I actually read another translation as well? And there is a Jim Clapfelter as well. Some can see that it is great, and some will say that it's obscure. It is your real identity, simplicity that will endure.
Thank you. Next up is going to be Evanique, David, Maritza, Kevin, and Paul. Evanique.
He embraces death and so does not perish, but lives forever.
Wonderful. Embraces death, does not perish. This is really fascinating. This is like a whole conglomeration of observations about life, living, and death. So I'm really looking forward to seeing the patterns here. David.
So there are a couple here. I mean, there's this one translation that is all 8. So just the last lines are, he who stays where he has found his true home endures long, and he who dies but perishes not enjoys real longevity. That's Wu. Lao. He who does not lose his station will endure. He who lives out his days has had a long life. Chan. He who does not lose his place with Dao will endure. He who dies but does not really perish enjoys long life. Hendricks. To not lose your place is to last long. To die but not be forgotten, that's true long life. Whaley. But only when what stays in its place can endure. When one dies, one is not lost. There is no other longevity. Lin. He who does not lose his center endures. He who dies, yet his power remains, has long life. Cleary. Those who do not lose their place endure. Those who die without perishing live long. And finally, Feng in English. He who stays where he is endures. To die but not to perish is to be eternally present.
Thank you, David. Could you do one thing? Read just the 2 lines, not the 4 lines, just 2 lines of all the things. So we can just focus on that aspect.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Wu. And he who dies but perishes not enjoys real longevity. Lao. He who lives out his days has had a long life. Chan. He who dies but does not really perish enjoys long life. Hendricks. To die but not be forgotten, that's true long life. Whaley. When one dies, one is not lost. There is no other longevity. Lin. He who dies, yet his power remains, has long life. Cleary. Those who die without perishing live long. Feng in English. To die but not to perish is to be eternally present.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you very much, David. That was just brilliant way of doing this. Maritza.
I'm amazed that there's so many different ones. Okay, so I'm going to read Antonio Rivas in just the last 2 lines. El que es capaz de mantener su posición resistirá mucho tiempo. El que es capaz de mantener su influencia vivirá después de su muerte. He who is capable of maintaining his position will resist for a long time. He who is capable of maintaining his influence will live after his death.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. Kevin, could you please read in Chinese and try to do like a character by character, just the 2 lines, okay, not 4 lines, just the last 2 lines.
不思其所则久，死而不亡则寿。I posted the Cognate for the last 2 words, last 2 sentences. Last one is 久. Basically, it's like you can use space or time longer, right? Let's see, you can that stone exists there for long. That also place live there, right? That's the 久. Then I'm going to personal. Normally use the last word "su." For example, somebody passed away. We normally put that as a big word. I'm going to put it that's a "su." That means longitude. Even they died. Normally, modern people will understand that means this person passed away, live long enough. For me, if from this text, even they died, they still not died because their mind, their thought, their heritage is long. So that's the word. So if word by word, 不思其所则久. Based if let's compare to Jason's translation, he used original. That's I agree with. But he used original mind. So that's his place. But don't know if it directly not lost someone place or then longer. Basically, if you don't if you someone don't lose your original place, original time, you always longer. You then another one is die and not passed away. The code "su," which means it's longitude, or the Jason used beautiful word immortal. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Next up is Paul, followed by Brian. Paul.
Hi. I don't have any translations, but I will try to comment on it. I got some Chinese culture in the past. I learned Chinese in the secondary school. So I try to translate or comment it from my knowledge. It might be different from you guys, but this is my limited knowledge.
Sure.
The 4th word of those 2 verses of the words, I don't understand, but I try to figure out. The 4th word in the first sentence is "so" in Cantonese. In Guoyu, in Mandarin is "shuo." Usually people will translate as the shelter or the house, the living quarter or something. But I would try to change it to like 所有. That's the belonging. That means if you don't lose your belongings, you're gonna be lost. Last long, some sort like that.
Wonderful.
And the 4th character on the second line is Mong. Mong, Wang. Mandarin is Wang. Cantonese is Mong. Usually, if we talk about the mind, is a similar word with a heart at the bottom. With the word heart at the bottom. With the word heart in the bottom, that means you forget. So it's non-existent in your mind. So without the heart, that Mong, that Wang, this word, I would think is a non-existence. So I would translate something like this. If you die and you don't non-exist, you are longevity. So in other words, if you die, if you still exist, it's called longevity. This is what I think. Based on my high school level, secondary school level of Chinese.
Excellent, Paul. Thank you very much. I mean, this is exactly what we have to do with any work. Put it in your own terms, no matter what your level of capacity is. That's what we're doing. I mean, that's what all of us are doing. Now we have a much tougher thing because we don't even know Chinese. And we are trying to do the same thing. So more power to you.
A little bit. Yeah, thanks.
More power to you. Excellent. Thank you. So it's going to be Brian followed by Amon. Brian.
Okay, this is Kimura. One who stays in one's destiny endures. One who dies without perishing lives forever.
Wonderful. Thank you, Brian. Amon, go ahead. What
Yeah, I wanted to give a little commentary, I guess, about these last two lines.
Please.
And their emphasis on some form of immortality. It can't be overstated how important a pursuit that was at the time of this writing. For anyone of any means, and especially the higher in government or closer to the emperor you might be, the pursuit of making yourself immortal was taken very seriously and very literally in a lot of cases. All kinds of ways were experimented with to achieve immortality. The terracotta warriors of Chin Huangdi are an example of one attempt at solidifying immortality for the most powerful man in the kingdom. But if you read 33 and then moving into 34, there is in 33 what Joe was saying before about this almost tranquility, or what could almost be said the soft power approach to know yourself, to excel over yourself as opposed to others, to be contented. And the very opening line of 34 is that the Tao is like water. And this is once again this common metaphor that is brought up again and again and again, but coupled together, what is being expressed here is a route to immortality by emulating the behaviors of the Tao, at least to my thinking, and that there is these very normal pursuits of ambition, of wanting to dominate, of doing what a ruler would do. That's a very human way of going about it. If you want to elevate, and even the term elevate yourself makes it sound hierarchical, because that line about not losing your original mind, that's almost a throwback to this idea of the sage is like an infant. The original mind is the mind of an infant, which is a blank slate, pure like water, reflective. You see in 34 where all of these ideas in 33 are reinforced, but in the grand scheme of, excuse me, here's how and why this works to gain you immortality, because real immortality is not necessarily done through alchemy or through the physical body. It's something that endures much longer than that. That was the 2 cents I wanted.
Wonderful. Thank you, Amon. Excellent. This is profound. All right. Now, if anybody wants to comment about the whole verse or whole chapter, it's going to be Maritza, and I have lost track of everybody here. Folks, go ahead and type exclamation mark. Maritza, go ahead.
Oh, yes. This chapter is interesting to me because it makes me think of the kind of the.
Marisa, I'm sorry to interrupt. Could you read the whole thing in Spanish? That way it kind of resets everybody to look at the whole.
Okay, certainly. This one is called in Spanish, this is Antonio Rivas, and he labels them with names just as Ursula Le Guin does. He calls this one virtud, which means like virility. He says, el que conoce a los hombres es sabio. El que se conoce a sí mismo es iluminado. He who knows men is wise. He who knows himself is illuminated. El que vence a los otros es fuerte. El que se vence a sí mismo es poderoso. He who defeats others is strong. He who defeats himself is powerful. El que se contenta con lo que tiene es rico. El que obra con determinación tiene voluntad. He who is content with what he has is rich. He who orates with determination has free will. El que es capaz de mantener su posición resistirá mucho tiempo. El que es capaz de mantener su influencia vivirá después de su muerte. He who is capable of maintaining his position resists a long time. He who is capable of maintaining his influence will live after his death.
Go ahead.
So to me, I find that this is it's interesting because what came to mind immediately for me was the idea of the way in which I viewed the separation between the words knowing and understanding, whereas it's like different levels. They're on the same path, but they're in different levels of your studies and your learning. And that's what I hear here, where you're saying, you know, it's good to know people, but it's better to know yourself. And it's like, don't sit down like you're done once you have achieved this ability to, you know, to know people or your humanity. You have to now then start, now you are ready to tackle the task of knowing yourself. And it's like, because you have reached the understanding of this one level, now you have to switch your perspective to the level where you're only at knowing and you want to get deeper into the understanding. And that I hear that in all the translations. To me, that's what I find in common, that it's saying, you know, it's like, it's not saying that any of these, none of these are bad things for us to endeavor, but it's like a soft caution to never be still. Forward movement, because once you have attained some type of mastery of one thing, you should realize that there is something else now for you to sink your teeth in that will make your life the better. You will attain, you know, I don't know if I know the goal here is not, you know, you're not seeking, you know, all this power, but the forward movement, that meaningful path is, you know, you can't stop and just admire that rock because now you think you understand it. You have to find what's next.
Thank you. Thank you, Maritza. Next up is Charlie, Margarita, and Kevin. Charlie.
Yeah, okay. I was really struck when I was listening to the translation of Ursula K. Le Guin, and before the meetup, I read the translation from Roger. Anyway, what he says is important for understanding the notion of perishing, Wang, is its cognate relationship with forgetting, a relationship that is made explicit here in the Dao De Jing. Okay, so there's a real strong sense that real dying occurs when one is forgotten. And so in Asian culture, from my own personal experience, you usually don't call someone by their name. Well, frequently you don't call someone by their name. You'll say, instead of saying John, you will say Mary's father. You know, and so that in a sense you are defined by your relationships. Okay. Now the next step in my like aha moment was the realization that when you do a translation, you are bringing meaning from before, which is contextualized, you know, because all meaning is contextualized. I don't think there's such a thing as meaning without context. But so you have to somehow or other understand that context and that meaning in which that was written, and then bring it into the present and recontextualize it in a way that brings out meaning within the present time. And that's kind of how that's really hit me when I was listening to Ursula Le Guin's translation. And it reminded me of the dispute between Antonin Scalia and Stephen Breyer, that Antonin Scalia wanted to have this originalist interpretation, that you had to, okay, interpret the law as it was originally written and intended, literally, okay, which is very left brain. Okay, and Stephen Breyer says, no, you have to do this thing like I was saying. It's like really you're doing a translation. You're translating the meaning and intent and contextualization from then to now. And, but the thing is, you have that sort of mushy thing about, because it's an art, okay? It's not a science, it's an art. And so I think that's what makes some people who are like to think in terms of black and white very uncomfortable, because you're going through all kinds of shades of gray to get where you're going to. But that's kind of what struck me, and I began to think, well, you need two things. You need to be able to go back and understand the context and the language, which I'm not able to do. I'm not a scholar of ancient Chinese, but when you're doing the translation, it seems like that idea that what it seemed like Ursula Le Guin did was to bring that meaning into the present and make it meaningful within the context of the present, rather than trying to bring you back into the past and see, to try to bring you into the mind of the person who originally wrote it.
Excellent point, Charlie. I find this point to be true whenever any kind of translation is attempted. The translator needs to be almost kind of at least half the level of the original person. You can see that when, for example, to give you a dramatic example would be when novels are converted into movies. Almost always they fail. But occasionally somebody actually understands the spirit of the novel and then understands it deeply enough, has the mastery of his medium, and is able to express that meaning in a completely different format. It's an extreme version of it, but the principle remains the same. And the reason I love the Ursula Le Guin's translation, after reading everything, that's the one that I've centered on, that's the core that I use, is that she's a poet. And she is actually trying to, she grew up listening to this, at the knees of her father, who was a very big fan of Lao Tzu and kept reading and kept discussing that. So she has absorbed all of that. And she has the artistic capacity of expressing the core thoughts in her own way. It's not a literal translation. It is a translation of the meaning, trying to express the meaning as powerfully, the original meaning, as powerfully as she can in her own art of expression. So thank you, Charlie, for making that point. Next up is Margarita, followed by Kevin.
Yeah, thank you. I have 2 points I get from this reading. One is regarding to my background. I think in my Asian Indonesian culture, if we were a parent, like older people, we have this mind about leaving a legacy to our younger generation. So often at times we focus on material things, but I think from this Dao reading, it is not that. It is more about leaving your legacy, but through your self-observation and your self-determination. If you know how you improve yourself by putting what you want to obtain in life, knowing yourself better, to be in your position, I think you will be remembered by the next generation. And that's beautiful. But that leads to the second point about and then this is kind of question maybe to Amon and others that can, because all this time I tried to understand Dao in terms of Wu Wei, effortless effort, something like that. But this time, as if like we have the ability to have this self-determination about how to improve ourselves. While in the other part, we also expect to see how the life unfold itself. So how should we have this self-determination about self-improvement, but in the context of Wu Wei? How we can be in line, that not doing our ego, but also to be part of this harmony of this universe. Yeah, that's a question actually. Thank you.
Thank you, Margarita. Amon, would you like to answer that? Only if you want to. Go ahead.
I can take a crack at it. Not that it's necessarily a satisfactory answer. So I think I mentioned once before how there are two very old versions of the Dao De Jing, and the older version was discovered to have the chapters in a reverse order. I'm a little off my game tonight, so you'll have to forgive me, but I do believe that this is where you've crossed the threshold, where you've moved from the Dao into the De. And De is, and I've said once before, Dao is much more a yin quality. It's much more hidden. It's much more needing to be discovered. It can be considered the yin of the two pairs. And De is the emanating virtue of something that is issued from an object. And I mentioned this idea before of the, that a tree has healing virtues, or that water has calming virtues, the way that we would have used that term virtue in very archaic language. We're moving into the part of the Dao De Jing where you are moving away from Dao into De. So there is something more active that's being asked of the reader here. There's now something more determinative. You are being asked to do what is needed to have De, have real virtue shine through from your person. And what I think Margarita was actually saying about this idea of the material versus sort of the lasting legacy of impression. People remember someone, that they were a sweet person, they were a kind person, they were gentle. They have a way of talking about people that is more about the virtue that they brought into the world and that they remember them for. And this is almost a guide post on how to develop that better, that there are better and worse virtues that something can possess. You can possess the best virtue by following what the Tao shows you or has shown you how to, through Wu Wei and through self-intention, actually go about developing a real virtuous character. And I come back to this idea that Wu Wei is not no action, it's non-action. It's the most effortless action, the most parsimonious action one can take to accomplish what one is trying to achieve. So I don't know if that completely answers your question, Margarita, but I think that's what you were at least getting a feel of.
Yeah, thank you. I like this, your answer. Actually, yeah, it is more about cultivating the virtue. And that requires certain kind of active agency of a person. Wu Wei and De that's the main two concepts. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you.
Better De requires better. Yeah, better De requires better intentionality, whereas anything will have De, but it may not have that much, and it may be non-virtuous virtues, I guess would be the way to describe it.
Wonderful. Thank you, Aman. That was a great answer. And I think that distinction between Dao and De is huge, because it is shifting gear. It's like moving from metaphysics to ethics. You're saying in Dao, you're saying this is nature. This is what things are. This is how the world is working. And you're saying, so I will follow the path, the natural path. I'm committing myself to that. So it is an intentional act of the sage. And it comes after Dao. If it is not rooted in Dao, then it doesn't have that virtue. But it is intentional. So it's really very, very well put, Amon. Thank you. Next up is Kevin, followed by Paul. Kevin.
Yes, thank you, Frank. I'm going to follow both about a conversation Amon and Margarita and yourself. The one I posted is here's the one we call how do you implement this? We and the, and here one is called 知行合一 in Chinese, Amon knows, and translated to English called unity of knowing and acting. Knowing is 知, acting is doing. So here they give you a solution. When we basically, for me, this chapter, the first six sentences is so powerful too. For example, the first one is 知人者智，智之者明. Know others, who knows others are wise or intelligent. So that's powerful. You raise as a manager or you make friend or just so you have to know the people, right? And second one, even further, is you who know yourself are enlightening or clear. The Ming is like sun and that word sun and moon together is clear. So here's when I was child, I got one poster on my dad office. The code I cannot remember exactly. I saw this from translated from Western, but I cannot find the original author. Basically, they said the people will not fear anything. We only fear we can overcome or beat yourself. Because that's your own enemy is bigger than anything else. And the third one is if you can win over other people, you are powerful. But if let's see, you can win your own, that's strong. That's make you last longer, make to the conclusion. Then the fifth one, if you know enough or know the satisfaction, are wealthy. What's wealthy? How rich is rich? When you know it's satisfy yourself enough, that you are rich. And the next following is 强行者有志, who can who are prevalent are basically we need persistent. It's unless we do things, we keep jump around, you never get a job done or achieve something fabulous. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Next up is Paul, followed by Joe. Paul.
Hi. I agree with what Charlie was talking about earlier. The translation has to be in context. Right now, we are trying to cross time and cross culture. So in the Chinese culture, that said certain things, and then it has to be translated into the Western culture. In here, that we have to understand in the Western culture ways of thinking, right? So my contribution is only be able to talk about the word by word and the technical stuff from a Chinese verse. That's what my understanding is, but I don't know the Western culture very well, so I cannot comment on the culture to culture translations, stuff like that, right? The first one, I want to just talk about a few things. The first one is 知人者明，知人者智，智之者明. I want to talk about the second one. To know yourself, okay. To know other people is smart, wise, or intelligent. To know yourself is it's like lighten up your mind that you can see through it. So you know yourself is like seeing through yourself in your mind, kind of thing. I would translate it like this. Yeah. To win others is has force. to win yourself is a kind of strong in character. It's not weak in character. If you know yourself well, you understand yourself weaknesses and your strength, and then you know your deficiency or some sort is kind of strong in character. I would say something like this. Yeah. That's all I want to comment.
Wonderful. Thank you, Paul. I want to say a couple of things. So what I was doing was that I've been collecting all the terms that they are saying, not that, but this, right? I mean, there is that formulation throughout. They're talking, and the pattern that I found, actually, when I read this poem, this verse the first time, I've kept on renaming the names that Ursula Le Guin gives to her poems, because though I like the poems very much, I never liked her names. So I have renamed everything. And this poem, I actually called Centering, because the pattern that I see in all of this is to say, instead of knowledge of other people, which is in the periphery, knowledge of yourself, you're going to the center and you're putting light in your center by becoming enlightened or wise. So you're moving towards the center in terms of knowing instead of outside. Overcoming others takes strength. Overcoming yourself takes greatness. So or power. So you're moving from external effects to internal effects. Richness is contentment. So again, you're saying, what do I really need? Do I have it? It's like looking deeper into your core and centering yourself there. And if you're doing things right, then you will be remembered. So it's kind of, so I see this as a movement, different kinds of movements, saying go towards the center and base yourself on the center. Next up is Joe.
Yeah, I mean, actually, I was going down the same road as this distinction between knowing and acting and the relationship between those two. You know, having knowledge of yourself, you become self-aware. But that also, the more you become self-aware, you're also aware of your limitations, which is actually helps you with your actions. Essentially, knowing when not to act, as Aman had said, is a source of power. So that the idea of restraining and not acting in the where you're overcoming, like, so the example where it says to rule others you must be powerful, but to rule yourself you must be strong. You know, power does not necessarily have to be something you're exacting. Power has to be something that you could be holding back in a non-action in a particular circumstance. And by not acting, that's the power that you are showing by not taking the action, and that's restraint that you have. And you know that because you're aware of yourself. So there's this external and internal relationship that you can kind of see, where it's yin and yang, actually. So anyway, that's
I also think you know, the point that Aman made about virtue is fundamental. It's all about saying that if you're virtuous at the core of your being, then you will be remembered, that you will have impact on the people only to the extent to which you have that. So I think it connects up with the De and virtue and immortality, or kind of staying beyond, you know, going beyond your life, with virtue being the key concept. All right, let's go to number 34. Who would like to read? Go ahead and type exclamation mark. Okay, let's start with Evanik, followed by Joe. Evanik.
Okay, 34. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay. The great Tao flows everywhere, to the left and to the right. All things rely on it for their life, and it does not refuse them. When its work is done, it does not demand recognition. It clothes and nourishes all things and does not demand allegiance. Since it makes no demand for itself, it can seem to be of small regard. Yet as all things return to it of their own accord, without being commanded, it can truly be regarded as great. It is only because it does not claim to be great that it is able to achieve such greatness.
Thank you. Thank you, Evanik. Next up is going to be Joe, David, Judith, and Brian. Joe.
So this is the GF Fu Fang version. The great Tao flows everywhere, both to the left and to the right. The 10,000 things depend upon it. It holds nothing back. It fulfills its purpose silently and makes no claim. It nourishes the 10,000 things, and yet is not their lord. It has no aim. It is very small. The 10,000 things return to it, yet it is not their lord. It is very great. It does not show greatness, and it is therefore truly great.
Thank you, Joe. Next up is David, followed by Judith. David.
Yes, thanks, Shrikant. So this is Harold Uhl again. The great Tao flows in all directions, to the left, to the right, at the same time. To it all things owe their existence, for it rejects none. Through it all things are brought to perfection, but it lays no claim to them. It clothes and nourishes them, but does not claim mastery over them. Because it at no time makes demands on them, we may class it with the humble. Because all things return home to it, and still it does not play the master, we may name it supreme. Thus it is with the sage. He never prides himself on greatness, therefore he achieves greatness.
Wonderful. Next up is Judith, Brian, and Maritza. Judith.
This is Stephen Mitchell. The great Tao flows everywhere. All things are born from it, yet it doesn't create them. It pours itself into its work, yet makes no claim. It nourishes infinite worlds, yet it doesn't hold on to them. Since it is merged with all things and hidden in their hearts, it can be called humble. Since all things vanish into it and it alone endures, it can be called great. It isn't aware of its greatness, thus it is truly great.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Judith. Next up is Brian.
The great Tao overflows everywhere in the universe. It suffuses with life all beings that depend on it for their existence. It accomplishes everything while remaining nameless. It nurtures everything while claiming no mastership. It desires nothing for itself and is therefore called the small. It is the source whereto everything returns and is therefore called the vast. Thus the sage never thinks of claiming greatness for himself, yet for this very reason achieves true greatness.
Wonderful. I really like Yasuhiko's translation of this one. Thank you. Next up is Maritza, followed by Paul. Maritza.
I am going to read again Antonio Rivas's translation. He titles this one El Dao no tiene favoritos. The Dao has no favorites. El Dao infinito fluye por todas partes, creyendo y destruyendo, realizando el mundo, atendiendo al más pequeño detalle sin pedir nada a cambio. The infinite Tao flows through all parts, creating and destroying, realizing the world, attending to the smallest of details without asking anything in exchange. Nutre todas las cosas sin controlarlas, carece de intención, por lo que parece inconsecuente. It nurtures all things without controlling them. It is lacking in intention, and because of this, appears inconsequential. Es la sustancia de todas las cosas, pero no somete a control a ninguna. No hace excepciones, por lo que es importante para todos. It is the substance of all things, but it does not submit under control any of them. It makes no exceptions. For that, it is important to all things. A causa de que no favorece a ninguna cosa finita, es infinito. Because it does not favor any finite thing, it is infinite.
Thank you, Marissa. Next up is Paul.
Hi, I don't want to talk about the whole thing, but a few words I want to comment on.
Paul, let's do one thing. Let everybody finish reading things. If you would like, you are welcome to read the whole thing in Cantonese. You've never heard a Cantonese version. Go ahead.
大道範係其可左右。範咧，can I talk about the third word in the first
Sure,
sentence?
please,
Yeah.
please.
The third word, 範, is like float, it's like flooding, is fullness, is very a lot of flows. 左右咧，the last two words is a verb. I would think is it can go to the left or go to the right. 萬物持之以生而不辭，功成不名有。The first part of the sentence, the last word 辭 is talk word or written word. So the first two words is 萬物 is 1,000 items. It means everything. Everything depends on it and survive. And he didn't talk about it and didn't record it. Success and don't name it, kind of thing. Yeah. 依養萬物而不為主，可名於小；萬物歸依而不為主，可名為大。I want to comment on the 大。大 mean 大 and the Tai Chi is similar. Is Tai is supposed to be bigger than the Dai. That means that Tai is bigger than the greatness. But I think the two words is the same. Dai means Tai means infinity. I would think, yeah. 以其中不自為大，故能成其大。At the end, it doesn't think itself is the infinity, so it can be infinity. Yeah, thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Paul. Next up is going to be Margarita, followed by Joe. Margarita, go ahead.
I will read in Bahasa because there's something different this time with the translation. Dao yang maha besar mengalir bagai air dan menggenangi segala sesuatu hingga bersamaan di sebelah kiri dan sebelah kanan. Segala benda dan makhluk hidup mengandalkan kepadanya, sedangkan ia tidak menolak untuk menghidupi semuanya dengan tak henti-hentinya dan tanpa beristirahat. Membuat pahala dengan tanpa maksud mendapatkan nama, memelihara segala makhluk tapi tidak menguasainya. Sikap Dao langgeng dan abadi tanpa pamrih hingga dalam pandangan manusia dinamakan kecil dan tidak mewah. Segala benda dan makhluk pada akhirnya akan kembali pula padanya. Walaupun begitu, ia tetap tidak mau menguasainya dengan sifat yang agung ini. Maka ia disebut maha besar. Oleh karena dari permulaan hingga pada akhirnya, ia tidak menyombongkan dan membesar-besarkan diri sendiri, maka justru inilah yang membuatnya sempurna dan maha besar. So what is interesting, I think there's the two lines. It's different with Jason's translation because maybe just the last line. From the beginning till the end, one do not brag about oneself. Therefore, it makes him perfect and also like great like God. So this in this translation somehow, this human is supposed to be human, but it can also reach some kind of greatness just like God. Maha means like extra great, like maha besar. So I don't know why it translated like that. Yeah, that's for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is going to be Joe. Joe, go ahead.
I was actually gonna, unless you're gonna read the Ursula Le Guin version, I can read it.
No, please do.
Oh, sure. So, perfect trust. The great way runs to left, to right. The 10,000 things depend on it, living on it, accepted by it. Doing its work, it goes unnamed. Clothing and feeding the 10,000 things, it lays no claim on them and asks nothing of them. Call it a small matter. The 10,000 things return to it. Though it lays no claim on them, call it great. So the wise soul without great doings achieves greatness.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. Next up is Kevin. Kevin, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Paul. Read the Cantonese. I'm going to read the Mandarin of Chinese. Chapter 34. 大道泛兮，其可左右；万物辞之以生而不辞，功成而不有，以养万物而不为主。常无欲，可名于小；万物归也而不为主，可名为大。以其终不为大，故能成其大。And
thank you, Kevin. So I'm going to read the translation of Jason again. The Tao is like water, floating all over. All things depend on it and are never dismissed. It accomplishes, but never possesses. It nurtures all things, but it never dominates. In this regard, it seems small. All things submit themselves to it, but it never dominates. In this regard, it seems great. Because the Tao never claims its own greatness, it always succeeds at being great. All right, so now let's go to comments. What do you get from this verse? Katie.
Yeah, this is where the reading that I was doing on the blogs was helpful because I was reading about the Tao as the source of everything bigger than the universe. And it was interesting to think about like the relationship with the Tao that people have with the Tao. It's like you live in harmony with the Tao, but you don't, it's not like you have a relationship with it, like in the sense that you would with God, maybe like asking for things or it having kind of like I don't know, like dominion over creation. So it was interesting. I think that here might be like all things submit to it, but it never dominates. It's kind of like something that the energy exists through everything and it encompasses everything, but it's not it's interesting to think about the relationship with it.
Thank you. Thank you, Katie. Katie, next up is going to be Kevin, Joe, and Maritza. Kevin.
I got 2 points here. First, along, let's see, continuous of last chapter 33. This one, the last one, they talk about what's big, what's small, what's great, or what's, let's see, little. So they mention that even I name myself is Dao. It's people, other, external never Dao. Normally, like if for our modern practice, okay, I'm good, I'm great. So that's why for me, I'm going to show the second point quickly. Imagine this chapter is talking about Dao self. Use the third person point of view, they are Dao. What's the Dao talk about themselves? Let's see how the name the small, how name the great. What that perspective? I'm going to pause here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Kevin. Great observation. Next up is Joe, followed by Maritza.
Yeah, I think in this particular verse, and you look at it, if with the idea of perfect trust in Ursula Le Guin's version as well, especially in the first verse, is the idea that it brings out the best in others. That's something that it's actually a nurturing force, but it also, the line that I loved in the Jia Fu Feng version is, it nourishes the 10,000 things and yet is not their Lord. It has no aim. It is very small. And that is not being tied to the outcome. That is letting nature be what it's going to be. In other words, you're nourishing, but you don't have any objective or any ulterior motive. You're not deciding the way things ought to be. And there's a wisdom in that. And there's also you're detaching yourself from the outcomes themselves. And that's also very different. Then you can kind of see where the contrast to the idea of dominating in the last poem, where the idea of power and over like externally, although that's a little bit off topic. But the other thing was that I did notice as well, this is also it's related to the external as well, not as much as the internal, but well, there's a balance between the two. The last thing I'll add is that in the last line, it does not show greatness and is therefore truly great. There is an understanding of what reality is, and we've had discussions about that in the past. It may not necessarily be humility. It may not be pride. It may be something about just knowing and understanding what the reality is of the world versus actually any kind of internal feeling or emotion. I'll just say that.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Joe. Next up is Maritza.
So this poem, I really like the name that the translator I prefer in Spanish used. This concept of the Tao has no favorites. And, if we remember that the Tao is the way has no favorites, which is really an interesting concept to me. And it's also a line that stuck in my head here is this, in this second stanza here in the Spanish translation I'm looking at, it says that it is lacking in intention. And I have spent the last few weeks focusing very hard on those things with which to, pick up with intention. So I just find it to be very timely to be reminded that not all things must be picked up, because like Joe just said it, balance. So lacking in intention can also, and perhaps should also, be a tool that one utilizes when walking along our way. I really enjoyed pondering that thought, that the idea that sometimes, I mean, if I view, or I like viewing most of these poems as reminding us to continue in our forward momentum, forward movement, and you're walking on this meaningful path. I really like envision what this poem brings to mind for me is the idea of not, I brought up rock before, I'm going to bring up rock again. If I see this really pretty rock and I pick it up, not to cling to it as the best rock, as it's my favorite rock, because that's going to put a condition upon me that perhaps may not be beneficial and is certainly not necessary. I like that we're also told here, it's idea of in not doing, one does. And I do hear that around here, in the Spanish translation that I read, the last line is just a little slightly different. It says, by not favoring any one finite thing, the way is infinite. And I like being reminded, A, that rock is a finite thing, and B, that it's dragging me down. I really like that. So yes, this poem made me a little more pensive than some others. I really enjoyed it.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Marisa. I want to comment on, I think there are lots of very interesting things you said. I mean, one part, I'm thinking in terms of the Marshall McLuhan's tetrad that I talked about yesterday, and we applied it to the design way. So let's apply it to Lao Tzu and compare the two. What is it? And the basic idea of the tetrad is basically a way of thinking about any human artifact. So here is the book, Dao De Jing. What is it? And you look at it from 4 different perspectives. First, you ask yourself, what is it that it retrieves? What is something that is older that this book is actually bringing back? And it's clearly nature to me. I mean, each of us will have different ways of expressing it, but these 4 ways, these 4 angles, 4 perspectives are a way of understanding any particular artifact that we are looking at. So Dao De Jing, I think, retrieves nature. What is it that it enhances? So what is reading of this book? What does it do for us? What does it enhance? I think it enhances our ability to pay attention to nature and to be more cognizant, more aware, we're more receptive to nature. So it is bringing back nature, and it is actually making you more receptive to nature. The third part is what is it displacing? That's the D. What is it displacing? It is displacing really culture which is not well formed, whether it is words, your habits, the way in which you're dealing with people. It actually challenges all of that. It is saying, go back to nature, really listen to it. And then the way in which you used to do things no longer make much sense. So it is displacing ill-formed things in the culture, including words and things. And the last one is overextend. What happens if you go along this line too much? What danger would you face if you went that? I think you will, if you push it too far, along the line of nature, you will forget the unique thing about human beings, that we are designing beings. So that part of our nature, that we are able to transform things, it continues to focus on nature rather than culture. So if you apply it outside its context, if you overextend it, then that is an aspect of you you're likely to lose. So that's my take on applying the tetrad to Dao De Jing. Next up is going to be Marco, followed by Cho. Marco.
Yeah, for me, like this is probably like an abstract way of seeing the poem, but I sort of like thought of like air. So basically that, air is like so non-evasive, like you don't even think about it throughout the day, and it's like, yeah, it's, you don't see it, but it's like without it, it's like, we won't be able to live basically. And so yeah, that's what it made me think of that. And yeah, just the metaphor of like air basically.
I really like that, Marco. I mean, it's a version of, thinking of water, except that air is even less perceptible, considered, it is the ground. It is the background thing that is actually supporting your life. So great point. Next up is Joe, followed by Charlie. Joe. Some problem with your mic.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I do have to think about the figure in the ground aspect of things, but what does it retrieve? I mean, I think it does absolutely retrieve nature. And what does it enhance? I think that it enhances the understanding of self-awareness, that there is a way of say that systems or even names or things that societal constructs that actually dictate your own, what you believe to be yourself. The forms are dictating who you are versus the actual functions. So
I really like that, by the way, that enhancing the knowledge of the self. I think that's very good. Go ahead.
Yes, and I think that that's essentially what it does. Is it really kind of it brings you to your true self, and I think that that's what I think that it also displaces the idea of using words and labeling things into categories. Ultimately, when you're making those types of decisions, you're cutting, and so you're usually sometimes when you go too far with that. That and you can argue that we have in a lot of ways with in the analytic world, or that we're becoming too quantitative, and so we're losing the actual essence of some things that we're talking about. And what does it overextend? I think there's two things that what can be lost in this are clearly it can become complete chaos without any kind of naming of things. So you lose the potentiality of the world without any kind of actions. So that there is that aspect, although there is a balance between the yin and the yang that still allows you to experience that. But it also, you may lose wisdom in that process as well. So when I say wisdom, is that I don't say it in the sense that if you're obtaining more, you have to name things to obtain a certain level of knowledge. I do believe that, even though that I am if you don't name anything. So you have to bring some order to the chaos. and you can go too far, as the Tao even said. I think 2 weeks ago we went by, you know, if you name things too many times over, that you lose the value of what name, but don't name too much. So in that process, what you could end up costing yourself is wisdom, because if you try not to name anything, then you may not even have knowledge of actually what you're feeling or doing, or take the action that you're taking. That's kind of where I'm coming from this. But it's a really interesting approach to apply the tetrad to this, because I think that how that works in with the question that we were addressing a couple of weeks ago with Stoicism was an interesting balance, and the tetrad actually kind of shows the shifts between those two.
Wonderful. Thank you, Joe. Next up is Charlie.
Yeah, when I was mentioning a thing about translation, then you started talking about the design way, and I got to thinking about how would you put Taoism into the design way? And it just occurred to me that one way to think about it, because Eamon was talking about Wu Wei is being not no action, but non-action or minimalist action. So that in a sense, and I kind of think that this is where this is part of Harold Nelson's thinking, is that the best design is kind of a minimalist design, in the sense that when you take into account all of these things that you're bringing together in an integrative manner, you don't want to bring in more than is really necessary. So that having a lot of gewgaws and doodads and whatever, you know, on your design, kind of to, flash people's, eyes and stuff like that, is probably not a good idea. That best design is probably something like, and this is just a thought that just popped into my head. But I was trying to think, how could you do that? How could you present, because a lot of people in the design group talk about designing a way of living. Okay, how can I design a way to live? And basically, as I see Taoism, is presenting the way as the way. Double entendre there, but anyway, so it just, because it doesn't seem like it's a design. It seems like a complete lack of design, but not really. I mean, because there is, you still have action, and you need to act, and so I don't know. It's just kind of a way of another view, I guess, on how you might conceive of thinking of Taoism as a design.
Yeah, that's very good. I mean, I would refer you to, we did a whole meetup on comparing the way in Lao Tzu, the way in Stoicism, and the way in design way. So I would refer you to that meetup. There are lots of interesting observations about the differences between the two, and they're actually a series. There is a difference, there is a similarity in them, and there is a difference across them. All right, does anybody else have any topics, anything that you would like to comment on? You're welcome to do that. So folks, the next one is going to be, we're going to go to number 35 and 36. I have to tell you that we are off to a great start in the Bible series. What we got from John was quite spectacular. I don't know if there is anybody who attended the series who would like to say a couple of sentences about it, because what I want to do is, this Friday I'm traveling, so I can't do a meetup on this Friday, but next Friday we are going to do, continue with the Gospel of John. And then the week after that, we're going to start Bhagavad Gita. So we're going to do Dao De Jing just on Tuesdays. Every Tuesday is going to be Dao De Jing, so we can continue. This is an amazing community. I think we're doing amazingly well. But then on Fridays, I'm going to alternate between the Bible and Bhagavad Gita. So we start to see the connections between that. If anybody who attended the Gospel of John would like to talk about their impressions of it, please go ahead. Joe, what did you think?
I have to say, I was a little bit kind of hesitant going into it, and I was reading it and I was thinking to myself, but I think it honestly turned into being one of the most insightful meetups that we've ever had by far. The idea of understanding what the word means and the potentiality of the world, of you're able to distinguish it was just essentially the idea of truthful communication and what that actually meant for your ability to determine what is real and what is good. That is essentially, I mean, you're getting into design into that exact in that framework. And then you're able to also define truth. So that's not only truthful communication is obviously what is needed in order to once you can have truthful communication, that's the way you're experiencing the world. You can bring things into, I don't want to say bring things into being, but you can start to bring order to chaos. And it's also, you can determine what is right and wrong when after reading that passage, that specific passage. So I mean, I'm not capturing it as well as I did, but as well as when we experienced it or discussed it, but it basically laid the groundwork for understanding the design way in a grand design kind of understanding of how words actually bring potential to the world and allow us to determine what is right and what is wrong, what is good and bad, what is lightness and darkness. It really did open my eyes. So anyway, that was my experience with it.
Thank you. Let me try to put it in my words. So I am in a very unusual situation because I know the least of anybody there, because I'm not religious. I had not read the Bible before. I'm not part of this. I did not grow up with Christianity, because even if you're not religious, when you grow up here, Christianity is all around you and you absorb things. And I did not. And so I come from a very different perspective. So I have the most to learn. What I was stunned by is the parallels between just the first chapter, not even the first chapter, the first 18 verses, and the design way. Because Jesus is called the Word. There was the Word. So his word, and word is truth. And he is God, 100% God and 100% man. So he's the ideal and he's the real. So word became flesh. So you have a combination of the real, the ideal, and the true in the person of Jesus. So that is like the whole idea, which is exactly the same idea as design way. Of course, design way express that I'm talking about it as the core idea. Now, the expressions of each of them is very different, but I was stunned to see that similarity. Next up is Evanik.
Yeah, I grew up in Catholic school and I came up in Catholic school, so I've read this passage several times, and I have to tell you, I've never read it in this context or like this before. I think, Shrikant, I think you kind of have the best perspective because it's so new to you. So you don't have the religious background that people telling you what it means. Like a lot of times in Christian religion, there's preachers, or in Catholic school, there's teachers telling you what it means. And I think what this meetup did on Fridays, everyone got to say what it means for them and how they see this passage. And I think the simple fact that we took our time and we didn't even get like halfway through is amazing, because we really took the time to really take it apart and really see what it means to the person. So I thought it was excellent. I think it's going to be a way of studying the Bible that hasn't been done. Maybe it has, but I have never seen it done this way. And I think it's an amazing way to do it. And I think you're so new to it that the questions that you asked during the meetup were poignant questions, and that it makes people think about what they really believe, you know, or think about what they've learned. And it wasn't in a way that, like, you know, it wasn't preachy, it wasn't evangelistic, because a lot of people use the Bible for evangelistic means to recruit people. It wasn't evangelistic and it wasn't preachy, but it had a respect for the writers. The meetup had a respect for the Bible as literature, and it had a respect for a Bible as a religious book, and a book that means a lot to so many people. And people got to express that in an environment that didn't judge them, but that they could really go deeper. And for people that didn't have a Christian background, or who may have even had, like, you know, maybe separated themselves from the Bible for a few years because of their past, I think it gives them a new perspective. So I think it's great the way we're doing it. And I'm looking forward to see what comes up during this chapter, because especially in John, it's not a synoptic gospel, and it is kind of different from, it is different from the rest of the gospels, but I think the perspective of John the apostle is very different from other people. And I think it'll be interesting to explore that.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Evanique. And I was amazed to see the range of people. Not really amazed. I mean, that's what our meetups do all the time. You have all these different perspectives, but people who are deeply religious, and this was like core to their beings, spoke. I mean, I was really honored that they felt comfortable speaking very directly from their heart about what this means to them. And they brought a lot of value to the meetup. There were many people who were not religious, who also had studied the Bible, were speaking. The people who did not know much who were speaking too. And the conversation was really special. And I think we have this Dao De Jing group to thank for it, because the general format and general way of engaging a text deeply, this meetup, the Dao De Jing meetup, is where we have developed that. Now we are able to take something like the Bible. Now, that's actually a much deeper experience because people are very familiar with it. So in some ways, it goes deeper. This one is new to most people. So you're exploring something new, different from what you are used to. In Bible Meetup, most people are exploring something which is deep part of them, part of their psyche, part of their culture, and we're trying to understand it in a fresh way. I thought that was great. Next up is Joe, followed by Mike. Joe.
Yeah, I mean, just really quickly, and it was interesting the next day that we were talking about the inverted self, but the ideal, the true and the real, and then you have this ideal. So you know what to strive for, right? You have the word became flesh, you had man, and you have God, and then you have the ideal. So once you have the ideal, you have the ability to determine what is wrong. So what if you're facing inward at that point? If you're say, let's just say that's the ideal, you're shooting up, we'll just say up and down, that you can start to say, okay, well then what is wrong? What would be the wrong way to do things? And that is unlocking essentially the potential of what is good and what is not good. And so that you can determine what is true. and that truth is something that you can determine what is truth is good. And then if that truth is good, that's ideal. But then you know that false is bad, or if fake or whatever, I guess the opposite of real is something that is something that is negative. But knowing the difference between those two is critical, because it allows you to have an aim and understanding of good design versus actually what is not good design. Anyway, I was thinking
no, absolutely. I mean, it connects with the Louis Sullivan meetup on the inverted self. So what Sullivan is saying is that us human beings draw on the real, the true, and ideal in order to rise up. When you push away the real, when you evade the real, when you are afraid of the ideal, and when you are pushing away the true out of your mind, you're going down exactly in the opposite direction. You are, I think, I still love the meetup that that CJ's friend did about the art expression, where she says, it's about love versus fear. Right. So you either you say yes and to real, true, and ideal, and then you go up. When you say no or but to any of these things, you actually are, going the opposite way. Next up is Mike. Mike, what did you think about the Bible meetup?
I thought it was a good exposition of what John is, and to me, it emphasized the differences between the Gospel of John and some of the other Gospels, the so-called synoptic Gospels.
Mike, I have to tell you, I actually listened to you. I went and read through the entire Matthew and compared that to John. And what I found is that I think John is a good starting point because it is more philosophical, and it hits the points. It starts with a bang. Okay, I think the first chapter itself, the first what we read, I mean, that is just so deep, so profound philosophically that it's a really powerful start. So I think it's a good, but at the same time, the richness and the detail that Matthew or Luke fill out is very, very useful and is critical as a next step. But for us, I think being kind of more philosophical, more poetical, I think, I don't know about the character of John yet as opposed to Matthew, but that's what, so I did actually go ahead and read Matthew, and I think I'm glad that we are doing John.
I agree with you. It presents, John presents Christ as more as a person, and rather than the miracles are left out, the Last Supper is left out, the transubstantiation is left out.
Let me comment on that.
But there's some things included that are not included in the others too.
Right, but you're absolutely right. I mean, you hit the nail on the head with your first sentence that Jesus is regarded as a person, and just the person of Jesus remains the center point rather than all the details, because in the details, actually, the core point gets diluted in some way. Wonderful. All right, folks. So I strongly recommend that if you can, attend the meetups, or you can watch them on YouTube. I've already put this up. I'm doing some interesting things. I really like the character of John the Baptist, partly because of Leonardo. Leonardo has some really, two of my favorite paintings of Leonardo are about John the Baptist. One is the one that I have linked to in that video, which is just John the Baptist. And then there is a second one, which is called the Madonna on the Rocks, which is a really amazing composition of Jesus and Mary and John the Baptist and his mother. So that four figure, it's like, it's the most mind-boggling thing. I think I have to speak about it at some point, but it is one of my favorite paintings. I've spent hours in front of it in the Louvre, up to a point where the guards were worried about what my intentions were. Of what is he doing, coming day after day and standing for hours in front of this painting? So they were very suspicious. But in any case, thank you very much. This has been an amazing meetup. And if you are not familiar with the Design Way meetups, that's something, that's another thing which is just incredible that is going on. We are diving into this book. The author is coming there. He's been talking us up on LinkedIn and all his blogs, and he's carrying the little videos that we are doing on his blogs. He's talking to various of his friends about it, and they're showing up. So it's really something. So the Design Way meetups is, again, breaking new ground of saying, what can we do with a book? Through this medium that we have actually created a new medium where we take an idea and we look at it through these multiple perspectives, where everybody gets to talk out their deepest ideas and listen to each other's deepest ideas and understand the book in a far deeper way than any of us could do individually. So it is a new medium. And this book is, the Design Way is the most challenging book that we have taken up in that tradition. And all of it is thanks to Dao De Jing, because it's like things have crystallized, thanks to this meetup. All right, folks, thank you so much. We'll see you soon. Bye.